HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Doctor Who Psychology, A Madman with a Box. Edited by Travis Langley. Forward by Katie Manning. Read by Esther Wane and Matthew Lloyd Davies. Forward. The how, not why, of who. Katie Manning. I have never been a why questioner. There lies a path to unanswerable conjecture, but rather a how questioner. How takes you down the path of logic, learning, and understanding. Being involved in television in the late 60s, early 70s as a young actress was a stimulating and exciting path of technological experimentation, especially in a program like Doctor Who, that I had watched from its conception, in front of, and from behind the sofa. It required space travel to other planets, aliens, electronic music, and otherworldly sound effects. The hero was a nomadic 2,000-year-old man with two hearts who travelled in time and space via a blue police box. A genius concept, allowing limitless adventures and possibilities into the world of fantasy and imagination. Computers were in their infancy, entire rooms of massive machines looking somewhat like Boss in The Green Death. Cameras were big and cumbersome, so to achieve what they did during the 60s in black and white was all due to the remarkable creativity of the enthusiastic, dedicated technical teams, with a great deal of trial and error and a very small budget, often with little time and difficult, barren winter locations. Last-minute lines like "freak weather conditions in Dungeness" covered the problem of 2 days of snow, rain, thick fog, and bright sun. I even had hot water poured around my thin suede boots to unfreeze them from the ground. Once we were in the studio for recording, there was a very strict 10 p.m. curfew, and with special effects to be done in the studio, it was always a tense time where actors had to be sure of achieving performances in one take. When Barry Letts took over as producer in 1970, he fought relentlessly with the powers that be to obtain a little extra money to experiment with the development of special effects and really take this unique program forward. Alien masks were given from the makeup department over to the special effects department, using anything and everything to achieve this end. The Earthbound Doctor. When I joined Doctor Who in 1971, it was the beginning of many new things, but very importantly, the first year of Doctor Who in colour. Colour separation overlay, too, now green screen, was in its infancy and would add so much possibility. I was put in front of 3 different coloured screens while it was being perfected. Barry also wanted to open up Doctor Who to a wider audience and age group, which he did with resounding success, building a cult following and soaring ratings. Barry Letts and his right-hand man, the incorrigible scriptwriter and editor Terence Dix, introduced the Doctor's Moriarty in the shape of the Master, played to perfection by Roger Delgado. Real members of the Army and Navy were used in several episodes. Richard Franklin was introduced as Captain Mike Yates to strengthen the unit team led by Nicholas Courtney as the quintessential brigadier, chap with wings 5 rounds rapid, and John Levine as Sergeant Benton. It was a risk to banish the Doctor to the planet Earth by the Time Lords. However, it really gave UNIT a solid part to play. After all, in our limitless imaginations, aliens are to be expected on other planets. But it takes a whole new twist when a policeman rips off masks to reveal faceless autons, troll dolls come to life and kill, or a man is even devoured by a blow-up black plastic chair. Completely non-human Daleks lurking beneath our cities, or the summoning up of the devil in a picturesque country village church, is perhaps more frightening and unexpected on the planet we inhabit. Storylines followed subjects like the slow destruction of the planet Earth through chemicals and financial greed. Interesting to me, and indeed perhaps the Doctor, was that all the scientific progress we make is useless without moral progress on any planet. Jo Grant and her Doctor. The casting of John Pertwee as the Third Doctor was inspired. An actor known mostly through radio and light entertainment, a master of character voices, and a real adventurer in his private life. All these talents added to the depths of character John brought to his Doctor, his first truly dramatic role. A swashbuckling dandy with a wonderful ethereal quality, a dark, secret side, and a desire for justice and peace, but always an otherworldly twinkle in his eye. A man we could trust. It was an honour to be cast alongside him, as I had grown up admiring his work. We instantly became fast friends, and I learned so much about everything from this wise and wonderful man. This played out on screen. I was working on a series, my first role out of drama school, for ITV, and I was not available during the original auditions, so by the time I appeared, the role of Jo Grant had been shortlisted to 3. After a lone improvised scene, I was cast. A 19 or 20-year-old niece of a high-up member of UNIT, who was hired not because of her ability, but because of nepotism. She had done a short training course with UNIT, escapology, Sanskrit, and some very dubious General Certificate of Education, Health and Social Care results. Jo could ask the questions on behalf of the younger viewers and non-sci-fi boffins, and appeal to the teenagers as a trendy mini-skirted, platform-booted, beringed girl of the 70s. She was foisted onto the Doctor. She was resourceful, brave, cheeky, disobedient, and a little clumsy. Didn't scream much. Did not always agree with the Doctor, but, as in the Damons, was prepared to lay down her life for the man she learned to love and respect. In turn, she brought out the nurturing side of the Doctor's character, and she grew up on screen in our living rooms, ending her tenure by marrying a Nobel Peace Prize-winning eco-warrior. A younger version of the Doctor, a professor played excellently by my then real-life fiancé, Stuart Bevan. In a beautifully crafted script, her meeting with her professor mirrored Jo's first clumsy meeting with her Doctor. There was no other part I could have played where my powers of imagination were so deeply tested, where I could have learned so much from both the technical teams and my fellow actors, or where I could have done stunts in the safe hands of the incredible and patient boys from Havoc, led by Derek Ware. John insisted on doing the majority of his own stunts, and I was never far behind. He was an absolute joy to spend every day with, and was a strong, committed team leader. The first 3. When the 3 Doctors came about, a first in bringing their past regenerations together, I felt extremely privileged to be working with the Doctors I had grown up watching. Sadly, William Hartnell, who set the bar very high as the first Doctor, and who I believe created some of the traits given to the future Doctors, was very ill, and his filming was done without us. Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor was a very different actor than John. Pat was what we used to call a classical actor, with a huge career in theatre behind him, and a wonderfully naughty sense of humour. He liked to improvise around the script, whereas John liked to know exactly what was going to be said and what he was going to respond to. Their differences were soon overcome with respect for each other's choices in playing the Doctor. Watching these 2 very contrasting but great actors weave their magic was a masterclass. Pat's Doctor may have seemed discombobulated, but this cleverly conceals the twinkling genius beneath the surface. The clothes that each actor wears as the Doctor help define his take on the character. New Doctors. This pioneering show prompted so many to enter the world of acting, producing, writing and directing, way too many to name. For others, Doctor Who brought a magical, trustworthy hero into their lives and living rooms. The genius Russell T Davies, a massively keen boy fan, was the champion who regenerated Doctor Who back onto our screens after a well-deserved rest, bringing with him all the modern technology along with brilliant scripts and casting. Amongst this, he also created marvellous spin-offs, including the Sarah Jane adventures with the unrivalled Liz Sladen. So, after 40 years, I had the privilege of working with a young Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, yet again putting a totally unique and delightfully physical stamp on the character of the Doctor. Though a younger actor, there was something extremely comforting and familiar about him as my Doctor. He was so warm and generous, and allowed me great freedom in our emotional scenes together. An unforgettable time, shared with Liz, and a script that encompassed Joe's life 40 years on. Perfection. On audio, I have played Joe Grant with Sylvester McCoy's Seventh Doctor, a lighter and enjoyably clownish take on the character. I played Iris Wildthyme with Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor, a younger, more gentle Doctor, and Colin Baker's more bombastic Sixth Doctor, and talked with Peter Capaldi, the 12th Doctor, about his inspired performance and layering of the Doctor. More recently, I have worked with the incomparable Tom Baker, the 4th Doctor. I could not ask for more. It seems to me, watching all the actors who have brought their innovative expertise to our screens, that one of the Doctor's two hearts belongs to the character, and the other to all the brilliant actors who brought the Doctor so strongly and believably into the hearts of the viewers, now seen and loved in more than 100 countries around the world. So the question of why Doctor Who is still so popular after all these years is impossible to answer. All Doctor Who fans will have their own take on that, and indeed who their favourites are. But for me, why or even who matters not at all. I shall just continue to watch, enjoy, and marvel at the phenomenon of the Doctor Who kiss. The love that everyone who has ever been involved or watched Doctor Who has.
Introduction. Madness in Who We Are. Travis Langley. I started to think that maybe you were just like a madman with a box. Amy Pond. A possible link between madness and genius is one of the oldest and most persistent of cultural notions. It is also one of the most controversial. Psychologist K. Redfield Jameson. Think outside the box. No matter how deceptively large your box might be, no matter how many swimming pools and libraries and strikingly similar corridors it might hold, and no matter where it might take you or when, be ready to step outside and look around. This kind of thinking takes the Doctor away from Gallifrey and carries him from one adventure to another, instead of merely observing history and the universe from a place of greater safety inside. Rather than stick with the tried and true, the Doctor tries something new. Copernicus, Galileo, Mozart, and countless others down through the millennia have been called mad for making novel claims, challenging established ideas, and trying something new. When the TARDIS, embodied in a woman, calls the Doctor, the only Time Lord, mad enough to run away from Gallifrey with her, is she calling him insane, or is she talking about his unconventionality? What is madness? Psychiatrist Thomas Sass has repeatedly accused the mental health profession of perpetuating myths about mental illness by describing any aberrant, disconcerting, outrageous, or otherwise unconventional behaviour as illness or disease. Diagnosticians evaluating whether clients' behaviour is bizarre or unhealthy must take into account what is considered normal for each client's environment, social class, or culture. The Doctor's supposed madness does not refer to regeneration-induced chaos in his memories and personality because that's normal for Time Lords. He's even thought to be mad by their standards. The qualities deemed inappropriate by their standards, however, may be heroic by ours. Scientific and artistic originality are not the only forms of unconventionality to get someone slapped with a label of madness. Standing up for what's right can, too, and the Doctor's fellow Time Lords are not known for doing what's right for others. By any standards, the Doctor is an unconventional hero. His thinking may be divergent, convergent, deductive, inductive, logical and illogical, or at least unconstrained by anyone else's rules of how to follow a logical train of thought. He engages in a lot of heuristic thinking, taking mental shortcuts because he often lacks the patience for more methodical, meticulous, algorithmic analysis. Taking shortcuts in decision-making leads to more mistakes, but to be fair, his heuristics are based on foundations more solid than ours tend to be. He charges in with little or no plan, tries something else, and continually adapts to circumstances because he has the sheer ability and experience to make it all work out in the end, most of the time, and a personality that simply lacks patience. What is the Doctor's personality? Given how many different incarnations he has taken, can we even say he has a personality? Throughout this book, that question keeps coming up. Every book in this popular culture psychology series covers a wide range of topics. Whichever areas in psychology seem appropriate and interesting to nearly 24 authors each time. And yet some specific subject emerges as the most prominent every time. Star Wars psychology, Dark Side of the Mind, stresses the importance of looking past the surface when considering the complexities of good and evil. The Walking Dead psychology, Psych of the Living, trauma. Game of Thrones psychology, the mind is dark and full of terrors, motivation. Captain America versus Iron Man, freedom, security, psychology, heroism. Star Trek psychology, the mental frontier, the growth of the human race. As it turns out, Doctor Who psychology, a madman with a box, looks repeatedly at the nature of personality. The who in it all. How can an unconventional hero with an unconventional personality, or personalities, help us look at human psychology? And can we really use our own psychology to look at him? The Doctor, of course, is not just any ancient time-travelling alien. He is an ancient, time-travelling alien who finds himself fascinated with us. We can use our sense of psychology to look at this character, and we can use this character to look at our psychology, because this character judges himself by looking at us. If there's a bit of bedlam in us all, then letting it out can sometimes be creative, constructive, and good for us. A kind of madness or passion that is not a mental disease at all. There's something you'd better understand about me, because it's important, and one day your life may depend on it. I am definitely a madman with a box. 11th Doctor. The madman is a waking dreamer. Philosopher Immanuel Kant. On the Air, Doctor Who, Television History. Classic series debuted November 23, 1963. First classic serial, An Unearthly Child, originally the title of the first episode in the 4-part serial, retroactively assigned as the title of the complete serial, introducing the First Doctor. Classic series ended December 6, 1989. Final classic serial, Survival, featuring the 7th Doctor. Television movie, 1996, Doctor Who, introducing the 8th Doctor. Modern series debuted March 26, 2005. First modern episode, Rose, introducing the 9th Doctor. We identify ourselves in many ways. Among them, how we care for others, and whether we'll help them out. Part 1. The Hearts of Who We Are. While other areas of psychology might stress how and why we do what we do, personality psychology builds a foundation upon the first question. Who are we? Chapter 1. Who's Who? Interview with 4 doctors and a river on the core of personality. Travis Langley and Aaron Sagers. Doctor Who? What's he talking about? First Doctor. Things do not change. We change. Author Henry David Thoreau. Stability versus change, one of the classic debates in the psychology of human development, concerns the permanence of who we are. Do basic personality traits formed early in life persist through an entire lifetime, or are they all flexible? The person you are at age 30 may be very different from who you were at 13, and yet you still seem likely to have more in common with who you were back then than with some other individual then or now. The Doctor changes more extremely and more abruptly than most of us might. But as the 11th Doctor points out to Clara Oswald right before he becomes the 12th, we all change. His changes reflect ours. The debate is not over whether change occurs at all. Instead, it is more about whether a person has core traits that will remain deeply ingrained, despite all other fluctuations over time. What is the who of you? Gordon Allport, known as the founder of personality psychology, described individuals in terms of personality traits, specific predispositions to react in consistent ways. He observed that some traits tend to go together. Trait clusters, aka personality factors, covered in this book's Factor Files. He concluded that traits can be what he called cardinal, central, or secondary, depending on how pervasive, infiltrating most aspects of life, and persistent they might be. Cardinal traits. A cardinal trait is pervasive and powerful. Most people do not have this kind of ruling passion that guides everything. Even a particularly friendly person, for whom friendliness is a defining characteristic, probably does not worry daily about finding the friendliest way to brush teeth or eat ice cream. Allport offered sadism as an example of a cardinal trait. Nearly everything the Dominators and Angel Bob do seems aimed at hurting others. So, in their cases, the cruelty seems cardinal. Fiction often depicts villains as having cardinal traits such as sadism or lust for power. But even they tend to pale in comparison to the single-minded Daleks, driven as they usually are by sheer murderous hate. When a single trait is all-consuming, the individual with that trait may have a personality disorder, because it may interfere with functioning in key areas of life. Central traits. Even if most people do not have one trait that affects almost all behavior, each person has a handful of characteristics that each affect a lot of behavior. That person's central traits. In the 2014 documentary The Ultimate Time Lord, psychologist Mike Aitken told actor Peter Davison, the Fifth Doctor, that even though the Doctor has a dozen well-established personalities, he also shows characteristics that carry over from one regeneration to another. Steadiness under pressure, risk-taking, extroversion, covered in Factor File 1, the 2 factors, extroversion and neuroticism, agreeableness, covered in Factor File 3, the 5 factors, adventures in the ocean, and possession of an ego that emerges when a leader is really required, even when he is a more reserved version of himself. According to that assessment, these consistent qualities would be the most central traits. Secondary traits. Less stable than central traits are the many characteristics that each affect only a little bit of each person's life. The secondary traits. Even if someone's love of chocolate is very stable, it would be unusual for that preference to affect much of what that person does. The Doctor's love of Jelly Babies candy, first shown by the second Doctor and most associated with the fourth, does not show up in every Doctor, and does not shape his major decisions. It is a quirk, not characterization. These secondary traits are not at the crux of the stability versus change debate. That has more to do with cardinal and central traits, the ones that answer the first question of who we each truly are. Who on who? Journalist Aaron Sagers has interviewed many Doctor Who writers and performers. Among his achievements, he broke the news that Tom Baker would appear in the Doctor Who 50th Anniversary Special, The Day of the Doctor, thanks to a revelation from the actor who played the Fourth Doctor himself. At various fan conventions, Sagers has moderated question-and-answer sessions for different Doctor Who stars. To help us get to the hearts of Who, he asked 5 of them about Time Lord identity issues, starting with how they get inside the head of someone so unlike any real human beings. David Tennant, 10th Doctor. I think the process is the same, whatever it is. Every character is a different set of circumstances. Some of them may be based on historical fact, or some of them may just come from a script, or some might come from your imagination or other people's imagination. With anything, you start with a script and see what else is out there, and hopefully it coalesces into something that makes a recognisable human being/alien time traveller. Matt Smith, 11th Doctor. Weirdly, with the Doctor, you have got a real person to go on because of 50 years of people doing it and 50 years of stories and 50 years of events. There's a lot of material there. Sagers. What are the core personality traits of the Doctor? What are the key traits that are shared across regenerations? Peter Davison, 5th Doctor. I always thought I wanted to bring a certain naive recklessness back to the Doctor, a certain vulnerability. I grew up watching Doctor Who. My Doctor was Patrick Troughton, and I think he had that. I think it disappeared slightly with John Pertwee and Tom Baker. It was something I liked in Patrick Troughton's character, and I wanted to bring that back. Sylvester McCoy, 7th Doctor. Funny enough, Patrick Troughton was the first Doctor I saw, but then I lost touch with it because I became an actor. There were no VCRs or way to record it and keep up with it, and it was never repeated. My distant memory when I arrived in the TARDIS was of Patrick Troughton. Then, I suppose, Peter and I are exactly the same. Matt Smith, 11th Doctor. I think we're all slightly mental, really. That is what is nice about it when you look across the board. He's always kind of mad. That was, I think for me anyway, one of the great virtues of playing him. With most other characters, if you're thinking of him as an alphabet, if you're playing a character and something happens to him, you have to go through A, B, C, D, and then you have to go through F, and eventually you get to Z. You go through this whole story. Whereas with the Doctor, you can leap from A without explaining any other letter. The great thing about playing him is he's always generally the most intelligent person in the room. He's always the cleverest. He knows the most, which allows him to be the silliest. Alex Kingston, River Song, Melody Pond. I wouldn't call the Doctor a madman. Tennant. What I always used to love about the Doctor when I played him were the moments where he'd stop and go, "This is brilliant." There was a sort of joy he felt in facing the little unexplored corners of existence, like the fact that he could stop and celebrate the extraordinariness of a werewolf before it bit his head off. Those moments where he would catch himself and be overcome by the marvellous stuff, there was something in that. I guess what appealed to the Doctor and his companions was a sort of passion similar to that. Smith. And courage as well, the companions, were all quite courageous and defiant. And he needs the antithesis, the balance. He needs someone to tell him, no, stay away from the werewolf. Kingston. And also he loves humankind. He doesn't know exactly why he has this affinity with human beings, but he does. He wants to save them, and that's very powerful. Smith. A central character that is essentially the kind of superhero of the piece that fixes the world with a toaster and a ball of string. That's how he saves the day, through being mad. That's sort of brilliant. Kingston. He does it with his smarts, not his guns. Smith. He is a pacifist, really. Roll call. Peter Davison, 5th Doctor. First appearance, classic serial, 17, 7. Logopolis, Part 4. March 21, 1981. Sylvester McCoy, Seventh Doctor. First appearance, Classic Serial 24, 1.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?